Because of the bad weather and everything, you get a bonus, okay? Many of these folks you know, but I will introduce them to you. Their images are maybe in some of your homes. And we've seen some of their images on the screen here during the presentations and that. So these are our artists. White Historic, Bryant and Pamela, Robert Griffing, and John Buxton. These two were with us last year, and we welcome you two to join us this year. So what we want to do is talk a little bit on the perspective of the artist, okay? Where do they get their ideas? For starters, why did they pick this genre and this period? So I'm going to hand this back, and we'll hide the mic. So how did you get involved with this?
I've been involved in living history since I was a youngster. I was, of course, kidnapped by my father and mother into doing this in Revolutionary War primarily. And I've been an artist all of my life. And the two kind of combine themselves. After a career in the arts, I had the opportunity to pursue only historic art. And after meeting my wonderful wife, she belonged to another reenactment group, which was French and Indian, Weiser's Battalion. So that added another layer to my influence and education on the history of America in the 18th century. And I've been doing this professionally now for about 15 years.
Well, I had been a book illustrator for about 18 years, and I had a hobby of reenacting, and as my husband said, with Weiser's Battalion, but also the German regiment for Rev War, so I did both. What he did not say is I'm a fifer and he's a drummer, and that's how we met. Okay, and it's a second marriage for both of us. So my hobby kind of grew a little more into my work, and by the time my last child left home, I thought, well, I really, really want to paint history full-time. So I said to the book company I was working with was Simon & Schuster. I said, I really want to do children's books, which is what I was doing at the time. I want to do history books. And their answer was, hey, nobody likes history. So I stopped doing books. And I started to just paint history. And I painted the things that I knew about and that I loved. And that's where I started. But as we will all probably talk about later, it kind of grew from there.
All right, my interest started when I was a kid, probably about 11 years old. I picked up my first arrowhead, and from that point on, I was into Native American history, and I accumulated quite a collection. I bought a lot of books, find out more about them. But the biggest mystery was the Eastern Woodland Indian, and that's what I really was going after to try to find out more about him. And so I ended up with about a 30-year career in advertising. I studied illustration and design at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and like I said, I ended up in advertising. And during that time, I was doing the research. I think it started in about 1985, and started finding out more and more about it, and started doing some paintings initially, and it just grew from there. I didn't realize how many other people there were out there that were interested in Eastern Native Americans, but I certainly found out very quickly when I had a show at my alma mater in Pittsburgh, the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. There was a lot of interest. I could see it was there. So shortly after that, I retired and went into this full time. And I've been painting that subject ever since. And it's been very rewarding for myself, and I'm hoping for the people that get to view the work. And so it's been a lifelong dream come true.
Ditto. No. Sorry. I'm the jokester. Anyway, no, I've been clowning around as an artist ever since I could crawl and everything else, like a lot of artists. That's my main interest is art. Unlike Griffing, who says he's been interested in Native Americans and stuff or whatever, I haven't. I've been more interested in art. And I fell in love with the area and the history just from hanging around Griffin, hanging around Penn's Colony and talking to the people. See, I was an illustrator, and Griffin used to buy my artwork because he was an art director, and I did that for 31 years. Now, unbeknownst to me, when people ask me, why do you paint history? I kind of fall back on this thing that's not really true. But see, my family came into this country through Jamestown. We've been here forever and ever and ever and ever, it seems like. But I didn't really know that until recently. So I kind of use that as a sort of a false thing, saying that's the reason it gives me credibility to paint the 18th century, because my people have been here for so long. But I don't claim to be a historian. I probably make mistakes and everything else, but when I get an assignment or a commission, I'll hire a historian to help me with the facts and stuff. Because most of these historians, or probably a lot of you guys out here, have been interested in that all your life. I've been interested in art all my life. So I'm not the most correct person to ask all kind of details and stuff. I try to put everything that's in the painting correctly, but I get it from books, from reading, from journals, and from talking to people that know a lot more about it than I do. So I studied at Art Center College of Design in California, and met Griffing around 1980 or something when we worked on stuff together. And I've been his sidekick ever since. See, he kicks me a lot in the side, so that's anyway. What?
Or vice versa.
No. But anyway, it's great to have someone that does the same thing you are, that's one of your best friends, so that it's been a great time. And what I do, I consider an adventure. It's so much fun doing what I do, and been so lucky to be able to make a living at it for like 54 years or whatever. And hopefully, you guys are getting something out of it that I do, so that's it. Is that a good enough question? We can ask questions and answer?
I'm going to ask how you choose your subjects and what kind of research goes into them.
Typically, it's inspiration for us reading journals, first-person accounts, newspapers from the 18th century, or speaking with other folks who are historians and finding an interesting story or something that we might determine for some reason is important to tell that story. One of the reasons we do what we do is to encourage people to become interested in the history of the United States and their own history. We had a show, we moved up to the Bedford area of Pennsylvania about 10 years ago, and we had a local show. And Bedford, Everett, it's a farming community, a lot of hay farmers up there. And we had a show of very intensive 18th century artwork, and we didn't expect much of a reception, and we got a great reception. We not only had the local folks come and see us, but pointing at our paintings and knowing what was in the paintings, because to them it was their family history. These families had been in the same area for hundreds of years, and they just follow their lineage, and that was really a plus, a bonus for us, being able to see people react to our artwork that way.
Well, as Bryant said, sometimes the inspiration is from letters, written accounts. But for me, as a reenactor, first of all, I get to play both parts. I get to play a guy as a musician and a girl as, well, a girl. So I get to feel what it's like to be both. And so a lot of my inspiration is through doing. On the field, I'm shooting a gun, I see what the smoke looks like, I can see all these beautiful light coming through the trees, I walk the walk, I mean nobody's shooting at me mind you, but I get to really see and feel and sweat and freeze and all the things that the people that I paint do. And it gives me, hopefully, the insight to convey into the work that I'm doing. Also, I make our clothing. So I understand where the seams fit. I understand how a woman in stays can't bend over to tie her shoes. I understand how the left thigh on a drummer's pants wear out because the drum's hitting it all the time, and I'm the one that has to patch it. There's a lot of things by doing, and I know that there are researchers who do not connect with reenactors as researchers, but I have to say I disagree. There's plenty of research that I do depend on researchers for, but there's a lot of the very physical things that you can feel and see and use that really do help in painting.
Pam is correct. I think all of us here base our inspiration off of journals that we read, letters that we read, and we also do just generic paintings. So it's the inspiration, I think, is just the native culture itself. With me, anyway. With them, it's the military more. But for me, it's the native culture. I just have such an interest in it, and over the last few years, I've been very fortunate enough to connect with a lot of the people in the Seneca Nation, and for me, that's a lot of my inspiration comes from them, because I just see it in their faces. I can see the history in their faces, and to me, it's great to be able to take that person who's living today and make him a part of the 18th century warrior, chief, or a clan mother, or whatever. So for me, it's the people. The people are just, I get a lot of inspiration from them, and it really, I think, since I've gotten involved with them, I think my paintings have actually improved, because I think I can create that emotion in the paintings a lot better just by looking at them and seeing their faces. So that's where most of my inspiration comes from.
Now, how am I going to top that? Well, a couple of years ago, I was on a panel like this at the Idle George Museum. And the same question was, why do you paint what you paint? What inspires you? And we were sitting there in a room with over 50% of landscape artists, okay? Some collectors, and I say this. I say, well, what I do is so much more involved, has so much more credibility, and takes so much more to do it because of the research, and everything has to be correct. I don't go out like a lot of landscape artists and just paint whatever God created. I have to think about what it may have looked like 250, 300 or so years ago. So I sort of made a bunch of enemies out of a bunch of landscape artists. Probably shouldn't have. So I am very good at sticking my foot in my mouth. So that's kind of what I'm known for. But anyway, no, but get back to sort of seriously. What inspired me in the beginning was just learning about the history of Western Pennsylvania. Now, I grew up in North Carolina, so my wife isn't particularly involved or doesn't know why bridges are named things and streets are named things in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. To me, this is just fascinating. And when we first started doing this, when Griff and I sort of started doing this, you're reading journals and you're reading everything you can find on it. You fall asleep reading it. And I live in Hampton Township. Now, Washington and Gist may very well have walked on my property when they came down before they built a raft. And if that doesn't make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, I don't know what does. Just to be part of it, just to be, hey, we're here right today, and all kind of stuff that took place right here. The ambience is still kind of here. It's still in the hills and the trees and the rivers and stuff that were here. So that's kind of what I try to do. But like I say, I am not a historian. I'm mostly a painter. Okay? Is that good enough? Stick, foot in mouth?
Everybody works in oils as far as the medium goes. Do we do pencil sketches or anything?
I use alcohol, which is a faster drying.
Faster. More, not like an acrylic, but Yeah, that's what I said, you want that.
Linseed oil-based oil dries in a few days.
Okay.
Alkyd oil dries in a few hours. Okay, so when I was an illustrator at Art Center out in California, basically, so I'm old, okay, we were using gouache. That's what the illustrators were taught to use because it dries fast. So that's an overpainting technique. It's not a blending technique like Griff does. See, he can take it and blend it all the way across. I make various strokes to get it across. And I make more mistakes than he does. Okay.
If you're going to take in a historic figure, somebody wants you to do Washington, for instance, where do you go to decide how your Washington is going to look versus the thousands that are out there?
You go to the source, Mount Vernon.
That's right. Now you can, but
Yes. Well, I couldn't either the first time I painted him, the first 15 times I painted him. What happens is, because I run into this with other figures, for instance, I'm painting Jefferson right now, and you try to read up on what did he look like. But it's not just what did he look like, it's what was his personality. That's a very big part of portrait work, of figurative work, because it's the way he sits. It's the way you're going to have him interact with the other people in the painting. Jefferson is sort of a one-on-one kind of guy. So if there's a crowd, he's not in the middle of it partying. He's out in the back watching. So there's a little bit of that in there too. But physically, as far as painting Washington, Mount Vernon has done forensic work, which is a real blessing for someone like me who paints Washington a lot. And that's a real gift that you don't usually get. Sometimes you can look for family members who may have a little bit of the look or a lot of the look. And I'll pass this to you because you were just talking about a fellow who was standing next to his own painting.
Sure. One of the members of our regiment is 1st Maryland Regiment for Rev of War, and one of the guys at an event at a historic home in Maryland was standing in front of a painting, and he was posing like the guy in the painting. And by golly, he was the guy in the painting, though it was a 200-year-old painting. His family lineage, his name's Calvert, his family lineage was straight. So he was a great reference for any kind of painting of the Calverts from here on. We found the same for several people, however, not always. We were fortunate enough to meet a descendant of Baron von Steuben. Looked nothing like him. I mean, one of the things that we have to draw upon as a reference is sculpture, and there's a sculpture of von Steuben that was done during his lifetime, so we judge that to be accurate, and this guy looked nothing at all like him. Once again, that is another source that we can go to, is both 18th century paintings and sculptures of these people. I had done a piece on the capture of, the capture of John Andre, who was in cahoots with Benedict Arnold. The 3 guys who captured him during the Rev War, there were 2 privates and a sergeant in the militia. No one knew them, and after that they became famous. Later on in life, they had life masks made of them by an artist as a project of his own, and they were older, so I had to do my own forensics to backdate how they looked. And if you're lucky, you can get models that look like them. Otherwise, you're an artist. You can probably figure it out, lighting and facial features that resemble what they looked like at the time.
Yeah, you're pretty much covered. No, it's, I really haven't done Washington other than when he was young. I think he was 22 years old. Basically, at that age, all you have to go by is painting, old paintings, you know. But yeah, as far as Indians go, you know, you're working off of, you know, who knows how correct they are. I recently did a painting of a chief called Red Jacket, Seneca chief, and he's they painted him quite a few times. I think there's probably at least 7 or 8 paintings of Red Jacket, almost as much as Joseph Bryant. But so you take all those paintings and you try to figure out what's the common thing in them. You know, okay, this has got obviously he's got a big nose, he's got the high forehead, he's got there's certain characteristics that show up in all these paintings, and then but some of them are way off. So you know you can almost exclude those right away. But so you just sort of take all those paintings and then do your version of it. You know, and that's the experience I've had with you know, trying to make a likeness of someone who existed back in the 18th century. Because there are no photographs. You know, it's not like the guys that are painting the West, where you got lots of photographs of chiefs and officers in the army and what have you. So you're working from old paintings. In Washington's case, we have, you know, we have life masks, we have all kinds of things to go by, but yeah, in most cases you don't have that.
Okay, I've done Washington quite a few times and some other, historical figures too, but what Griff hit on, you know, no photographs, but I also did Abraham Lincoln, which is in Harrisburg. So as an artist, the first thing I did was buy the book of every single photograph ever taken of Abraham Lincoln. So that told me what not to paint, because historians will say, oh yeah, that was the one from July 14th, and you know. So what I'm doing, remember I'm an artist, I know how to draw, and I've been doing this for a lot of years. So what I did, and that was one of the hardest portraits that I've done, I think I must have painted Lincoln 7, 8, 9, or 10 times. And every afternoon when I would finish, I would think I hit him. Now, you know he's got a crooked mouth, if you've ever seen it. And, of course, he's got the little, never mind. But I'm painting something that there is no photograph for. But I've got all of these photographs of him. And, of course, the paper, Pittsburgh paper said I did a very romantic version of him. But I painted him as if I thought he might like to look. Because Lincoln has tons of looks. If you look at him, he's ugly. He was said to be one of the ugliest guys going. And why am I doing 19th century? We're talking about 18th century. But anyway, I was given to kind of talk what Griff was talking about, that we are lucky in some cases that we don't have the photographs in the 18th century. So sometimes we can get away with a lot of stuff. But the thing with Washington, like Pam was talking, you know, if you want to go now, they spent all these millions down at Mount Vernon to do those. And what I had to do, as Pam had to do before that, we've just got to use sort of common sense and you know, take the dollar bill and make him younger, okay? So that's some of the stuff. I don't know if I've answered enough questions, but if you guys want to ask questions later and whatnot too. But.
One thing I was going to say, historical, I know you do more military, and do you, okay, when you go something that you know had happened at Bushy Run or something, do you go to the place, do research? Talk a little bit about what you do there.
Yeah, that's actually opened up a large venue for us personally. The paintings that we typically do travel to the site. Most of the time there's something there remaining from the 18th century, whether it's just the landscape and the lay of the land, or perhaps structures and fortresses and whatnot are still there. Pam and I did a series of paintings on the Battle of Brandywine, which is the largest land battle of the 18th century in the Rev War. It was about 3 miles by 14 miles of battlefield. We went there at least 4 times during different seasons to try and get different views of different perspectives. Some of this has been under conservation, and some of it is townhouses with the names of the people who died there. So we have to use that bit of us that is an artist, as John was saying. We are artists as well as, I'll say, semi-literate historians. So we do travel a good bit. Pam and I have been lucky enough to travel up and down the East Coast as well as in Europe for our references.
Yeah, on the fun side of that, as Bryant just said, I was commissioned to do 4 paintings for the Hugo MA preservation over in Belgium. So I did 4 battle scenes of the Battle of Waterloo as a fundraiser. So they sent us to Belgium for 2 different times. And who knew that you were going to get so much fun out of a job, right? So, but yeah, it is very, very important to go stand where it happened, go see what it looks like. And again, I work off of feelings. I mean, I want to feel it, touch it, smell it, maybe even taste it, I don't know. So.
Yeah, that's, with Bushy Run, we pretty much know exactly where everything happened on the first day of the battle and the second. I was painting the first day, so I wanted to get a good perspective of the lay of the land. Obviously, the trees that were once there back in the 18th century are all gone, so all you got is open field here. So, but you're still seeing the lay of the land, and that's all really that's important, because you can get your tree reference other places. So I took my shots where I thought would be a good vantage point, seeing the battle, and actually stood in that spot and took my photographs. And then, like I say, you can add all the trees and all your people and all the army and everything later. So that's sort of the way it's done. I mean, it's almost impossible to go to a site today and see exactly how it was back then. So you sort of have to use your imagination and use whatever research you come up with. Now, I don't know how many times I've painted the point with either Fort Duquesne or Fort Pitt on it. I've painted almost every angle you could paint it from Mount Washington, and 2 or 3 of them from Mount Washington, from West End, from the North Shore, from the north side, up in the hills. I mean, I've done quite a few of the point. But we have good reference. We got the point there. We know what it looked like back in the 18th century. We got nice models to work from in the Fort Pitt Museum. So it's sort of like a big puzzle. You sort of take your shots from whatever angle you want to do your painting from, and then you do the research, and you can usually put your painting together with everything that you find. But we do have really good reference on Fort Pitt and Fort Duquesne, so that part is probably makes it much easier. But there's just no way of getting to a site that looks exactly the way it did back in the 18th century. It's just impossible.
But sort of like Pam said, I insist on going to every place because I want to feel it kind of like she's talking about too. But what I want to know is, where does the light hit? Like we did the Ligonier thing, and went up on where the cemetery is, now, and research and see what kind of trees might have been there. Now, I did put a hemlock in there, and mostly hemlocks grow down lower, but you can get one hemlock. Never mind, I'm like whatever. But anyway, what I want to see when I go to a place is, I'm like Griffin and they said too, I want to imagine in my head. Remember, I do images. I'm trying to get pictures. Even when I read stuff in journals, I'm getting a picture. Now, it might not be the same picture Griff or Pam or Bryant was going to get, but it's my version, okay? Each one of us will do the same thing entirely different. But going to the actual places, in Springfield, Ohio for that thing, Falls of the Passaic, tons of them. And Griff thinks I'm an absolute idiot for going to some of these places and not nearly killing myself a couple of times. But, that's part of the adventure of this thing. And getting that image to me is very important. There's buildings there, there's bridges and stuff today, but up here, you use your imagination. What would 200-year-old or 300-year-old trees look like? That's going to create shade, but all right, but the sun's going to be about basically the same. Okay, now don't get too specific because, the track of the sun is different from all that. Never mind. It's fairly close to the same, okay? The scientists will tell you it varies, but anyway. I'm just hopefully getting, never mind. Wait till you get to answer questions.
With the subject matter, we have dress for military. We've got civilian dress, we have Indians, whatever. Where do we find our references to make sure we're putting the right uniform on the right guy with the right insignias, the right marks with the Indian, with the right jewelry or whatever? How do we do that?
That's a good question. How? It's a never-ending conquest trying to find the right information for any particular unit or clan or tribe in any particular circumstance. There's new information that comes available every day when someone cleans out their attic and finds old letters and writings and descriptions. But there are so many sources now. The internet has been an incredible boon, not having to travel to 10 different libraries to find 2 sources of information. There's professional subscriptions you can buy into that draw on many, many different libraries. Oh my gosh, let's see. There's a project I'm working on right now. Once again, it's a Revolutionary War battle, the Battle of Brooklyn, concerning the 1st Maryland Regiment. They were heroes, and they were sacrificed essentially to save George Washington's army. I'm looking into finding what they wore that day, and I'm finding conflicts where they're wearing hunting shirts similar to what I'm wearing, or where they're wearing regimental coats. Well, there's information showing that they had both, but it doesn't show what they were wearing. So it's always a conquest trying to find out who had what on what day, and there are many answers to your question. So I'll let these guys answer.
One of the things we do is if we're at a museum or someplace that has collections. For instance, the last time we were down in Williamsburg, a friend of ours who runs the collections department, which is handy, took us in the back and started pulling drawers, and suddenly I can see all of these civilian gowns and coats and babies' clothing and things that you just don't get to see. You can't touch it, but you can see it, you can photograph it. And all these things are terrific, except these are all the things that nobody bothered to wear. So you have to remember that. So it's great if you're doing upper class for what I do, for Rev War and French and Indian War. But as far as you want to get down to the dirty camp follower, the wagoneer, the guys, the people that they don't talk about, that they rarely even mention, that is the most difficult. Slaves, howdy, let's try to find what they're wearing. Runaways you can find accounts of. But it's really, you gather lists, you gather collections of photos of stuff, and you don't even know you're going to use it. Okay, so, I'm sure these guys have much to add to that.
Okay, unfortunately, this is my last question because I got to get going. But yeah, I mean, when I first started this, the research wasn't there. I mean, there was enormous amounts of information out there, but it was just I couldn't find it. Talked to historians; they didn't know what the Native American was wearing, and we just went around and around and around. It took a lot of time. But I did find a lot of the information in my own library because I've been collecting books for quite a few years on it. And so I started there. That's basically how I got to know how they were dressed. And, there were some paintings out there, not very many. Benjamin West did a few. But it was scarce. And there was a time there when I almost gave up on it because it was, very difficult to find out information. But as time goes on, so you start accumulating information, and it just grows and grows and grows, and then you find out that you don't have to do as much research as you used to because now it's all up here. You've spent a lot of time doing it and a lot of time reading about it. One of the most interesting things I found that there's enormous amounts of information just in the written word. You don't really have to see a picture. The colonials and frontiersmen who kept journals would usually write down exactly what they were seeing. And some of them are very detailed. Not a lot of them, but some were very detailed, exactly what they were wearing, how they looked, what kind of paint they had on, what they did to their ears. I mean, this is all written down. And so we have, once you find those, there's actually a guy that actually put 2 books together with a lot of those descriptions, written descriptions. And so we got to use those as our reference. But it's there, it's all been, takes years to accumulate, and we keep finding new things every day. I mean, it's not to say that something new doesn't come up every now and then. So, but it's been fun, and it's that's the exciting part about it, is the looking for the search, trying to find out what was really happening back then and how they really looked, So that's sort of where I was. So folks, it's been great having you here, but I do have to leave. So John, take it.
Goodbye, I'm going to talk about you. I'm not joking. Do you know what that guy has accomplished? Even the Native Americans themselves didn't know what the heck they looked like back here in the East until that guy told them and showed them what it looked like. Everybody does Hollywood, and they look all Western until that guy came around. Really glad I know that guy.
Before I let you take some questions, I want you to talk about where I can go to get your artwork, okay? Or, what? You can tell?
John Buxton sells our artwork.
A new profession?
The best place to reach us and to find our artwork is online, of course, at whitehistoricart.com, where you can purchase our artwork, and it has our contact information. And if anyone has any questions about what we do and what images we have that are new, we're happy to talk to people and have them by their studio as well, as long as we're at the studio and not places like this.
Well, I'm represented by the Greenwich Workshop. When we started, Griffing and I were both with Paramount Press, and I branched out to go with bigger and better things. No, that's not true. But anyway, galleries that represent, do the Greenwich Workshop stuff, or you can get my reproductions at Lord Nelson's Gallery in Gettysburg. Not too many galleries are still around, but that's basically it for me. But, well, Griffin, Paramount Press galleries, and Lord Nelson's Gallery also, which has been selling our stuff for ages and ages. And we appreciate them like gangbusters. But can I answer a question before? Sure. Like you doing the Mount Vernon thing, one of the greatest things I did on that one is I spent a whole 2 days down there trying to figure out the light source, to figure out what time of day, for the Washington thing, coming, returning, and photographs and photographs and photographs and photographs from moving here, moving there, moving down, watching the sun come down. That's the best way to do that. We just don't have we can't do that every time for every single one,
Sleep on his front yard.
The same kind of deal then. Yeah.
So
Were you painting the front yard then too?
Well, we do the show down there for the last 20
Yeah.
years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there from dawn to dusk.
So what you were trying to do is figure out what is the most exciting when the sun hits it all day.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Yeah. Anyway, I've been doing this too long. Oh. Any questions? None? Sure.
Question for everyone. There are some that you take, that you do a lot, like George Washington. Do you find it to get easier to do like your initial sketch, I'm assuming? I don't know the way you do it, but I'm assuming that like you make sketches of them and then find the one that suits you best. Does it get easier? Does it go quicker?
You become more familiar with a character the more you paint them. But I'll go back to children's books. Children's books have 30 illustrations. You've got the same characters, and when you're looking at the character face on, you may look great, but once you turn his head, all of a sudden you've got to learn all about them all over again. Well, it's the same thing with Washington, Jefferson, or anybody else. You're looking at a profile or a three-quarter, or he's looking down, he's looking up, he's mad, his mouth is open. It's different every single time. You've got some things that stay the same, like his nose is still the same length, the distance between his eyes is still the same. But it really is quite different. It becomes a little bit easier because he becomes your own guy and you make him be your Washington. My Washington does this. He rides the horse like this. You know, it's that kind of thing. In my world, it looks like this. But it's still different each time.
Anybody else? They are here, so come and stop and see them, okay? You guys didn't bring anything this time, but last time you had a bunch of stuff, okay? So, visit them. Now give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.